Hello, hello, hello. This is Misty Magdalena Grace with the new and improved version of Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, where we talk about spirituality, psychedelics, plant medicine, microdosing, and really that journey within to finding your best innate wisdom, to your best health, your best wealth through all sorts of inner child healing, trauma release, grief recovery, overcoming addictions, and working with the mind, the body, and spirit. So go ahead, leave a review, subscribe, download. We look forward to your feedback. Thanks for tuning in today. Hello, everybody. Oh my gosh. Just want to first of all acknowledge my live audience. We are a little late. You gotta love California traffic, but we're here. We made it, and I'm so excited. We have a double header today for those of you on the live. It's Suicide and Recovery Awareness Month still, and we have an amazing double header today, kicking off with Timothy here. So I just want to really quickly remind everyone, if this is your first time, we do stream this live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So if you want to, if you're a part of the live studio audience, feel free to play along. You can comment below with questions. You can even comment #live, city, state, country you may be tuning in from, and just letting us know you're here. And also on the replay, #replay, and even go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel. All of these things are appreciated, especially because you may just save a life by helping the algorithms and allowing people to know that this is happening. So again, my name is Magdalena Grace. I am the host. I'm a medicine woman and a healing practitioner here in Southern California. And I've lost count. I think we're on, episode 10 for the month. And I'm just going to dive right in. Today we're talking with Timothy Mabry. Did I say your last name right?
Yes, you did. Perfect.
Woohoo! And I just met him last month. And when I heard his story, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have you on for Suicide Awareness Month. He's the founder, father, and a survivor. So I'm going to let him explain all of those roles and his journey and what brought him to be on our show today. So Timothy, take it away. Share with us your story.
Well, Magdalena, I really appreciate you allowing me to be on this podcast. It's, to me, amazing when I get opportunities like this, because several years ago, I was in such a bad headspace where I didn't think my life even mattered whatsoever. And when I met you at Unicorn Universe, I heard you had this show and we started talking. It's like, okay, that is someone who has a very similar passion and understanding, because not many people want to talk about their stories. Kind of like we were talking about earlier. Suicide, mental health, it's like a dirty little secret that we don't want to tell anybody. It's like, oh, this is dirty. No, I don't want to say about this. But I've personally found through my healing journey, one of the best things to do is to talk about it. And it's never easy to talk about. No matter how many times you say the story, it's still impactful. And I appreciate you giving me the chance to share this story with your audience. And my ultimate goal is to help other people and to bring awareness that you're not alone.
Beautiful. Thank you. And you have such a powerful story. You're the first, I don't want to give away too much, the role that you've played in your profession, and what you're going to share as a first responder. As an example, I guess a little spoiler alert. We haven't had anyone from that background on here. So I think what you're going to share today needs to be heard. So I'm super grateful that you're here.
I appreciate that. And I'll get into it then. My story, I guess, was started when I was young. I grew up in a very tight-knit household where my family was there, but my dad and on his side had also gone through mental health issues. One of my uncles, before I was even born, actually, he was about my age right now. He took his own life in the late 80s. And my dad had battled with that. And I never really got a good sense of how to cope when you're struggling mentally. And as a young adult professional, I entered into the Navy. And into the Navy, I was going through some hell. I some stuff happened to me that as I spoke up about, they ended up discharging me because of it. And yeah, it was pretty bad what happened. I just pushed it down for years and years and didn't want to address it because, as again, it was my dirty little secret. And military, if you have a problem, they make it known. They make it known. They make you feel like garbage for it. That's why suicide and mental health issues in the military is also really high. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but it's several veterans a day that end up taking their own lives. And throughout my journey in the fire department, I've seen a lot of trauma. So I went from Navy trauma straight to the fire department. And I spent 9 years fighting fires, saving lives, and seeing countless numbers of traumatic events. The average person may see death a few times. I lost count. I know that in 1 month alone, I called it Black May, and I saw within 2 weeks over 10 people perish within such a short time. And some of those I witnessed their last breath. And I, again, would push all that down. Every thought, every negative thing, just push it down into a bottle. And eventually that started to pour out into my life. I ended up getting in trouble at work. I was a fire officer. I wasn't just a firefighter. I was an officer on the truck. I was in charge of a station and my crew. I started letting them down. I started slipping. I didn't really care. I didn't really care what happened to me. I was taking extra risks that I shouldn't have. And I just kept spiraling and spiraling. I ended up getting a write up because of this bad attitude and inaction. And then a month, well, that when I got that write up was my first real cry for help. It was my first time telling somebody in a way I need help. And when I got that write up, my captain asked me, "Are you okay? Like, something's not right. This isn't the normal Mabry that we know. Everything okay?" And I just sat back, looked at him, and it's like, "Nope, not at all." The captain said, "Oh, okay." And the battalion chief couldn't even look at me. Like, he didn't even make eye contact. They ended up giving me the write up and sending me home. I was suspended for 2 days. So the next shift completely, I was off. And the next month, I got into a car accident. And I was hurt. So I was already mentally struggling. Then I had the accident. And during that time, was going back through the VA claim phase. So everything that I pushed down in the Navy and what happened to me was all coming up at one time. It was that pressure cooker that was exploding. And being physically, mentally, and emotionally hurting and super stressed out, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed with a gun, and I was pulling the trigger. I was pulling to that. And the crazy part was my wife, who was 9 months pregnant at the time, was in the room next door. And she had no idea what was unfolding. I had concealed it so well that she didn't know the severity of the depression. She didn't know my true demons because I referenced Frozen. Conceal, don't feel, don't let it show. Don't let them know. I did that so well. And just like so many men, we keep that hidden so well. Like, "Yeah, how you doing?" "Oh, I'm fine. I'm doing fantastic." But in reality, like, I'm not. And that moment almost occurred. And I just remember in the moment of pulling the trigger, all the suicides and all the death that I had seen flooded back. And I threw that gun down. I was like, "Not today, Satan. Not today. You are not going to get me today. I'm going to choose to live and to not die." And I call that by an act of God, because if those feelings, those thoughts and images hadn't have come into my mind at that last second as I was pulling the trigger, I wouldn't be here today.
Wow. 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 Thank you so much. I've got goosebumps because that's there was a lot that you shared that I would like to unpack a little bit, but I didn't want to interrupt. Was there anything else that you wanted to share in this moment?
Well, that's the bulk of the trauma. The healing part that took a while.
Yeah, I think maybe what we'll do is we'll come to that. I want to unpack because you mentioned a lot of things that you're not the first veteran that I've talked to that especially I don't know that there's anyone that's more common, whether it's Navy, Army, Marines. I haven't studied that much. I've heard anywhere from 22 to 35 veterans though per day take their own life and or struggle with addiction, since this is addiction awareness or recovery awareness month as well. I think that's just another like a slower version of suicide when you're struggling with addiction. But you talked about being a man, talked about being in the military, you talked about a lot of death that you witnessed, and how ultimately you just had to suck it up, buttercup, it sounds like, and just grin and bear it. um, what about that? Would you want to unpack a little bit more to kind of share, especially since men are the most likely to die by suicide? I know of my 12 friends that died by suicide, 10 were men. And you were about to be a father too, if I remember right. Your wife was pregnant at the time when you were about to take your life too. So there's a lot of things that were hiding underneath the rug or underneath the carpet. So where would you like to begin to talk about how you feel like you want people to be aware of this?
Well, the big thing that I noticed is I ran some experiments with people, and not in such a good way. And I say that in my healing journey, and I started to be a little bit more open with my feelings and emotions. When people would ask me, how am I doing? I would just test and prod to see what reactions would be in public, in fire departments, military organizations, and even churches. Different place when I would get asked, how are you doing? I would be honest with them, like, terrible, horrible. I would be upfront with what I'm doing. And I found most of the time, people aren't equipped with that. They don't know what to do and how to react. And the first time that I had said something about that in the fire department, I almost committed suicide, the the looks were like, "What? Are you serious? You really? You almost did that?" And then it's like, "Hope you're getting help. On to the next subject."
Wow,
And
wow.
I had seen, and one of the reasons I pushed it down so much is in those organizations, I had been told and seen examples of people struggling, and then the comments, if you can't handle it, get out. There was one call that is ever etched into my memory because it frustrates me to this day. It was a guy threatening to jump off the roof of a building, and one of the other firefighters said, "Hope he does it. Hope he's just not wasting our time and actually goes through with it." And I just remember thinking, our job is to protect and to serve and to care for people. And
Wow.
you're saying that about a random person. What about us? Like, why would you want to do that? And that was a very common theme of, if you're struggling, deal with it. It's not that bad. And if you speak up, you get isolated. The protocols for mental health in these organizations, they're not helpful. Is if right now in majority of fire departments or military organizations, you say I am depressed and I am struggling with suicide, like I'm contemplating it, you will get isolated. The opposite of what you need actually occurs. Instead of people coming around you and surrounding you and uplifting you, you get isolated. You get put into duties that just make things worse. And
Wow.
it's their idea to try to protect you, but it's just isolating further. In depression, you get into such a dark space that you don't see a way out. You see, the only way out is by death. And that's the sad truth. But there's way more options out there, but we don't know about it. So whenever your mind is focused so much on the death, and like, okay, that's the one way I know out, let me take that avenue. But if you're presented with 4 or 5 different options, and death being one of them, you're going to look at the other options. Like, okay, yeah, that might be a little extreme, but I find it a better, easier or better way out.
Wow, I'm curious, did they treat women any differently, or was it just across the board? And I know it's a male-dominated profession, but I was just curious if you saw any any difference at all.
I didn't have too many women who were in for a long time. There was a few,
Okay.
but it being male dominated and type A personality, I would say it was more across the board because males in general do not like to talk about, address emotions or feelings. They tolerate their wives, and even that, most men don't even like to hear about their wives' feelings or days.
Right.
They're like, oh my gosh, like, hold on. Men, actually listen to your wife's day and care about her feelings. It'll make your life a lot better because that shows that you truly care and you need it too. I
Hmm.
didn't think I did. It was emotions, feelings. Huh, we don't do that here. But now
Yeah.
I find that very helpful and healing, especially when trauma or something happens. It'll cause you to bend and not break.
Hmm. Well, thank you for that. Because I feel like you also mentioned type A personality, and I'm a recovering type A overachiever type. I actually thought, man, I probably should have gone in the military or become a firefighter or something because I was all about the Ironman triathlon competition, never let them see you sweat. Even if you're bleeding, it's like a badge of honor to be so strong. However, it backfired on you, and I want to mention something that you alluded to earlier, that it was, and forgive me, I didn't write it down fast enough. You said your dad's brother died by suicide as well.
Yes, my uncle.
Okay, yep. So your uncle, it seemed like no one had probably any coping skills or processing of that trauma either, right? Would you say?
Oh no, not at all. Because there was a couple of occasions where my dad almost committed suicide. Like he made threats in front of us because of that. I remember distinctly us fighting my dad away from to find a gun. He knew where one was, and my brother and I were fighting him away from that.
Okay. Yeah, and
So
studies have shown, I don't, and this is part why our mission at the Lotus Throne Foundation is to break these generational cycles, because once it's in your body, like it was in my mom's, when by the time I was born, she had multiple attempts. And so it's like in your DNA, and then it's in your environment. I'm sure you probably, maybe your father also is feeling guilt and shame, and just having that awareness that suicide is an option. I don't have the stats memorized, so forgive me, but I know it increases at least by 11%, if not greater by association. But also if it's in your bloodline and you don't talk about it, you call it the dirty little secret. Did your family talk about it much at all?
oh no. And you're talking about recovery as well from like addiction. My dad, when he was an alcoholic, like when he did that, he was a heavy alcoholic. He couldn't keep a job. At one point, in one of his drunken rages, I made him so mad that he actually tried to kill me. At one point in time, like he picked me up off the ground, choking me, and my brother and mom had to take him away from me. And then it was a few months later that we had an altercation where I again made him mad. And his solution to show me was to go and find a gun, and we had to wrestle it away from him. But you're right, it is a generational cycle. And healing, I started to see that how we raise our kids is how we've been raised. And if we don't recognize that, we're going to have the exact same in churches in some places call that I think it's generational curses. It's exact same. It's these cycles, these curses happen because we pass down our lessons that we are in our parenting from our parents to our children.
Mhm.
and we have to be conscious of it. I still have behaviors that I do that my wife will check me on. I was like, that was your parents. Quit it. You didn't like that as a kid. Now you're doing it to our kids. You need to stop this or you're going to repeat this cycle. And they're like, oh, now I get it. But
Beautiful.
it's understanding, okay, I have to be a change maker. And it's always a battle.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for bringing to our audience this awareness about your experience both in the firefighter community, the military community, and the male population. It sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from what I'm hearing, and we could talk a little bit now more about your healing journey. You've kind of alluded to it. Sounded like you became more open and sharing your emotions and being vulnerable. Would you say that's what was part of your healing process?
Oh, yeah. That was a definite part of it. And it took me a few months before I fully opened up to people. The first time that I actually told anybody outside of therapy about my attempt, it was about 5 to 6 months after my attempt. And I didn't even tell my wife about that. But the moment she found out, we started going to a Bible study. Well, we got plugged into a church close to us, and they had a small like young adults Bible study group on a Friday night. And that Friday night, on the first time, I let it out. I told everyone there, including my wife, what had happened 5 months prior. And that conversation on the way home, and looking at my wife, she had no idea. Like she started to break down on the way home. It's like I had no idea. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know how bad it really was. It's like I'm sorry, like don't apologize for it.
Mm.
That was me, because all the training, all the resilience and mindset stuff that I've done to conceal, it made it nearly impervious. If someone builds up brick walls that are so high and strong that you can't even see into, you're never going to know. And that's what happened. So I don't blame her or anybody else fully. Like there are warning signs like, hey, cry for help, but sometimes it's not a, hey, I'm about to kill myself. It's, how you doing? Not okay. It's subtle hints. But talking about it is one of the first things you got to do to start to heal. And when I did that, it was like a weight got lifted. It's like, wow, this is different.
Wow. Do you, after that, and you felt like you probably had a little bit of that weight lifted off your shoulders, what happened next to help you in your healing process? What did you choose to do?
I chose to not go back and to really address my thinking. One of the things that I found through therapy was to address what they call stuck points. Have you ever heard like what a stuck point is?
Tell me what that means, what you believe that means. I think I do, but I'd love for you to share.
So in the therapy I was going through, it's like cognitive behavioral therapy from the VA. They identify a stuck point as a negative belief or thought that you have about yourself or a situation that holds you back. And for me, it was I'm not good enough, I'm worthless, and I have no value. So that's what a stuck point is, and that's what I kind of had. Or and one of them was, oh God, why me? Like, why me for all these bad things? Why for this? And I started to address each and every single one of those negative things with my mindset instead of listening to music or being in dead silence, to start to change the inputs. Like, okay, what was working before didn't. Now let me rechange my mindset and my thinking and start being grateful for what I have. And that was, again, repetitive. And the first time you start to change those stuck points, you're like, nah, that's not true. Nah, there's no way. Then you slowly but surely start to believe it. And as you start to reshape your mindset and your view, your happiness changes. You start to manufacture, like, and you see how we create our own reality. And the reality that we create is either a positive or negative one.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. I call it a fear shadow process where you acknowledge those negative thoughts or limiting beliefs and let them to be seen, be heard in some aspects, but to recognize that they're not true and it's not reality. You can choose a new reality. So, and you witnessed a lot of death though through your career and had probably also a lot of unprocessed grief. So I'm curious if you I know, tough, strong men don't cry, right? That old lie. Did you cry? Did you allow some of the grief to process also to help you heal?
I didn't really cry. I teared up a few times. One of the times that I almost I was actually started to tear up pretty good, almost cried. Oh, it was a year after my attempt, and my battalion chief, his wife, who's also a dispatcher for our county, ended up passing away from cancer.
Mm.
And I just remember being at this firefighter funeral a year from almost a date and just sitting back, looking at my daughter, looking at my wife, and everybody around. And the thought in my mind was, a year ago, this was almost me. This was almost my funeral. I just had that and I kind of felt selfish about it, truthfully, in that moment. Like, I'm here for somebody else, but that vision of a year ago, this is almost me. This turnout, this hurt was almost because of my actions. I'm like, what ripple was I about to have? And just seeing my daughter, that was
Mm.
shaking because she would have never known me. And she's a happy little girl. Like, she's happy, she loves her daddy. But if I would have ended it, I wouldn't be here. Or so, my daughter wouldn't be happy, and my son wouldn't even exist now. But I just sat back and looked, and in that moment, I almost cried. And funerals and people passing away, it's still highly impactful because I think about that. And yeah, in those moments are when I'm closest to tearing up. It's like, geez, what I almost missed out on if I would have fully enacted that moment of desperation. Like, how much better my life is now that I've changed my outlook.
That's amazing. Yeah, we've had multiple guests now share that it was a child that kept them from you know ending their life and just recognizing how fragile life is. And um, what else helped you along the way? The behavior therapy, recognizing those falsities that weren't true about not being good enough. What else?
I started listening to podcasts about mindset, overcoming, motivational speaking, and then just plugging into people, being intentional about it. Instead of pulling away, start to re-tie in to help others, and
Mm,
then to speak about it. I found that helping other people is one big way that helps me heal. And then listening to a podcast about healing, about mental, like true mental resilience, not the not one-sided of being able to charge in, but what about secondary, tertiary? What about the after effects? That type of resilience, because anybody can charge into a situation. That's not a big deal. It might be initially, but that's brief. For charging into a fire and an unknown, that it's going to be no more than half an hour. Your air tank, you're going to be out within 30 minutes. So within 30 minutes, you're in and out of a situation for a fire. You might have to go back in, but your initial punch, half an hour. But then you have days to weeks to years to process what happened. And that's the moment where the true resiliency needs to kick in. It's
mm,
the initial punch is getting over that initial fear, but you have adrenaline to go with it. You have other people
mm,
around for those moments. Then when you're by yourself, when you're alone, that's when those demons in the darkness sets in and they start to play. So in those moments, you got to learn how to shut them out and to say, shut up. And I now have a funk breaker playlist that I've created for myself.
I
That
love it.
whenever yeah, I'm adding to a cost. Like today, I was listening to a song on the radio. I was like, oh, that's getting added to my playlist. And it's knowing the little triggers and the tricks to, okay, I'm noticing a trend or a pattern. So let me stop the spiral. Let me pull out of it now before it gets too out of hand.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I like that funk breaker playlist. I just want to repeat that back because it's just
Yeah,
fun to say.
funk, funk breaker.
Yep, funk. I got you. Yeah, we want to make sure we're not swearing, although, if you want to swear on here, you can. But anyway, funk breaker playlist. I love that. Music is so healing. Sound is so healing. You talked about gratitude. You talked about reaching out, not isolating, putting yourself out there to serve and be of service. You also shared something with me before the show. Actually, I think in our Zoom we had in scheduling this podcast that I would love for you to share. Even in your training, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you're firefighter, first responder training, didn't they say something like you were going to have, I don't know if it was suicidal thoughts or mental health issues, or there's a high stat or probability of that?
So what we were told, and this was actually by a captain, he was saying that you're more likely going to die 10 years younger. When you retire, you're going to retire at a mediocre or retirement, and you're more than likely going to get divorced at least once.
Wow.
As
And then go ahead.
I was like, as a young fireman, you're like, what? They told me a lot of bad things too. They're like, when you get married, everything will change. They made me write that down and put in my wallet. They're like, everything will change and not in a good way. That was their mentality. Like it was negative. They were taking their toxicity and then implanting it. And it was, but like captain said, I've been divorced 3 times. I'm on my 4th marriage. And the best advice I can tell you is don't tell it to your wife. Whatever you see here, do not tell it to them. He's like, my first 3 marriages I did, and they couldn't handle it. They couldn't deal with it, and they divorced me. I think there was more to it. I know that there's more to it than that. He's not saying.
Yeah,
But
of
his
course.
mindset was, you don't say it at all.
Right. Wow, which that's when you, like you said, pressure cooker, things just start mounting up and up and up and up and up before, something's got to give. So with that, how would you, and I don't know if they gave you, it didn't sound like it, so I'm just going to reiterate this. It sounded like they kind of gave you a doom and gloom, but they didn't have any other tools or positive ways to cope and work through it. You had to figure it out on your own, or was there any helpful tips along the way?
There really wasn't helpful tips or tricks. And all the trainings and programs that I was going through to be an officer, there was not much about mental health and how to address it and what to do, any of that. That's one of those, again, in the literature, older school mentality of the macho man is like, yeah, we don't talk about this. Culture, HR, those issues, no. And they wonder why there was such a high divorce rate is because it's going to come out in one way. You get pushed for so long, it's either going to come out in anger, depression, or in some type of vice. It's going to come out. And that vent is very prevalent. And now, because more and more people are talking about it, it's becoming more aware. And whenever I talk with first responders and military, even veterans, I'm actually in the process of trying to get with a couple of organizations to roll out something that I've created to help these groups.
Awesome. Wonderful. I was hoping I was going to ask you if you had any advice for someone who's listening that may be a veteran, a first responder, firefighter. If you want to give, I mean, you already have given some really beautiful tips that across the board can help any listener, but what would you, if you could go back? And so you're speaking to your past self, but also any listeners out there. what advice would you give them that you haven't already shared?
The biggest advice I would say is first, change your mindset and start to breathe. Like when I say breathing, we're like, oh, we all breathe. Fire department, oh yeah, we get taught breathing techniques. Yes, but not for stress. It's to become aware and to get out of those funks. Is so it bring those thoughts to light, breathe, talk about them to other people, and then seek help. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of a careful part here is you have to know who to talk to. Some people who you bring your issues up to, they're going to try to belittle or they're going to push you down.
Okay.
But you got to find the right ones to talk to. And like if you don't know who to reach out to, find me on social media, reach out to me. I help people. If you come and say, hey, I'm struggling, I will take time out of my day, no matter what time of day it is, to help you. And if you're in those positions, you got to look for those subtle cues. And it's okay to have the crisis. It's okay to be struggling. But going back to younger Tim, it's breathe, be thankful for what you have. Don't look at the current circumstance, look at the bigger picture. Look at the ripple effect that's about to happen. If you don't think people care about you, you are dead wrong. You are wrong. There are plenty of people who care about you. Just pick up the phone and call. Call several people and just talk. And I'm willing to bet if you on most people you call is like, hey, I'm struggling. I need some help. They're going to stop what they're doing. They're going to call you back because you matter. And it's not easy. When you're in those points, you don't want to reach out. You don't want to.
Mm-hmm.
And for those in leadership, ask your people and not just how are you doing? Don't ask that. It's what can I do to support you? What's going on? Like you start to dive deeper, ask multiple questions and not just once or twice. Build a rapport, show that you really care. And then if they are having those issues, they're more likely going to bring them to you because you created an environment.
And I
And
feel safe.
yeah, that you feel safe. And a big way to doing that, to creating that safe environment, is being vulnerable. The moment that I started to bring like my issues and my vulnerability to the surface, I had some of the deepest conversations with people that you would never get because they want to be able to have a safe environment. But if they don't feel safe themselves, they're not going to share that. And by you being vulnerable first, by you sharing your struggle, your story, it's going to empower somebody else. And you may not even think it's that big. We had a call once where a lady was in a conversation with us and passed away. And it affected me, but not too terribly bad. But I looked around the room at the other firefighters and I could see the reactions. They were just like, they were getting cues that something was bothering them. When the chaplain's like, hey, everyone okay? I looked around. I was like, you know what? This bothered me. It bothered me that we were talking with this lady and she just dropped. And we couldn't save her. We did everything in our power. That bothered me. And talked about it for a couple more seconds. And then I stopped. But because of that, those other two firefighters were then bringing their thoughts to the surface. That if I hadn't done that, they would never have brought it to the surface. And I know that would have bothered them because of what they said. They were blaming themselves for her death, for them not recognizing the signs as quick as the battalion chief and myself. We had seen that type of scenario before, so we knew what was happening. They never did. So they were putting the guilt onto them when there was nothing that they could have done. And by first being vulnerable, it allowed them to heal and open that up. So you're not weak. You are not weak for opening up, for being vulnerable. Some of the most successful people in history, they journaled, they talked about it. Our society now says if you're journaling, you're writing about it, you're weak. Heck no. Emperors in Rome and major generals in the Roman army and throughout history journaled and wrote about their thoughts, their feelings, what was going on. Lincoln was notorious about it. Do that. And you're going to heal. You're going to be able to take what's in your mind, put it on paper, to put it out there. And it's going to be that healing journey. It's going to be that releasing that pressure cooker so that you don't explode. Like if you ever have an Instapot, it says release the pressure before trying to open. Because if you just try to open it, it's going to explode on you. It's going to hurt you. So you got to release that steam, release that pressure, and then you can open that lid when the pressure's gone, and then you can start to heal fully.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's like a purge. As part of my profession, I help people heal the mind through physical and spiritual cleansing. And a lot of what you're talking about are great examples of that. The spiritual cleansing is, hey, it's not a sign of weakness if you admit, what bothers you or what is hurting you. And the writing itself is so cathartic, and getting it out on paper. I know some people really hate journaling, so I just remind people, if you don't like to journal, if you want a voice memo, you can voice memo too, because some people are really resistant to journaling. But this has been so amazing, Timothy. I know you had mentioned, people can email you. Where else can people find you? I will include your email address in the show notes, but how can people find you?
Well, they can find me on social media and LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn primarily, but I will also send you something that I created before, and I called it the Leader's Guide to Mental Awareness. It's how to foster. It's 6 steps how to be a leader worth following, and it's a way that a leader can take that and implement it into their business, into their role, and to start recognizing mental health issues, how to be that leader who fosters a safe environment, and what to do with it.
That's so great. Yeah, I know when I introduced you, we talked about that role of being a leader, and ultimately leaders lead by example, and you've exhibited that and helping give other people permission to do the same. I just have one more question before we wrap up, but I'm just going to do some really, really quick reminders. I see we still have some people tuning in. If you saw value in the show today, as we start to wrap it up, it's not too late to share the link. If you're on Facebook or LinkedIn, I think you can just hit the share, or if you're on YouTube, which is a great way to share. If you're not and you want to check in later, look for Misty Magdalena Grace and Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, and subscribe and like and share this actual show. And of course, if you're in iTunes later, however you want to share it, sharing is caring, especially in this month of Suicide and Recovery Awareness Month. I know I've lost 12 friends. I said you lost someone else in the past month, and it's happening every day. And like you said, it doesn't have to, because you were fortunate. I believe there was a divine plan in there to help give you some like almost like a flashback, I'm imagining, of these thoughts, and you're like, what am I doing here? And unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there that don't get that, and it's because they don't have the tools. They isolate. So all of these tips were very, very unique and helpful today, especially if you know a firefighter, first responder, veteran. This is a great opportunity to pour into their lives. I also want to remind you, if you didn't see our live stream from last Saturday, September 21st, we had our pre-launch. It was kind of like the dress rehearsal for 2025 and the Lotus Throne Foundation. You can go to magdalenagrace.com. It's at the top. Just watch the live stream. It's about an hour and 20 minutes. And of course, if you're a subscriber already in my YouTube channel, it's there underneath the live streams. And take a look. A lot of people have given us such great feedback. Again, great stories, different perspectives. Again, our most important mission with this cause, with our life's work, is to help break these generational cycles of trauma, by suicide or addiction related deaths that are generational. And then of course, ultimately our quote by Mark Twain, I like to share this this month especially: the two most important days of your life are the day that you were born and the day you find out why. And in a case of Timothy, even myself, once I figured out why I was here, I lit a fire inside of me, that divine spark within that just lights you up and shines your light out into the world, can make such a difference. And as you heal yourself, you heal others and you inspire others. So that's really our ultimate purpose, is to help people realize why you're here. So just wanted to share those quick reminders. And on that, I did want to. Oh, good. I got your link. I'm going to share that in the show notes for what Timothy was talking about, the Leader's Guide for Mental Wellness. So take a look at that, and you can also contact him on Facebook, LinkedIn, email. Again, that'll all be in the show notes. So I have a closing question, Timothy, and of course, if there's any last thoughts, maybe you can wrap that up into this. This show is called Healthy and Wealthy and Wise, and we're really all there's a lot of meaning to that phrase. It's been the name of my show ever since I launched it in July of 2020. Even though I've changed from entrepreneurship to more of a spirituality podcast. When you hear the phrase healthy and wealthy and wise, what does that mean for you?
Well, that means it's kind of like my logo. You have to have an equal balance in everything, because if you're not healthy, you're not wealthy, you're not wise, you're going to have a struggle. And you got to be healthy with what you're doing physically, mentally, emotionally. Wealthy, if you're wealthy, you're able to do so many different things and have a better impact, like in a positive way. And then wise, wisdom normally comes from life experience. And that can either be your own experience or somebody else's. Picking up a book, listening to a podcast like this, you're going to be able to get little tips and tricks that you're able to unlock the next three. It's like, so you have the healthy, wealthy, and wise, that equal balance in everything.
Beautiful. Well, thank you. Any last quick closing thought that you want to share as we wrap it up?
Thank you for allowing me to share my story and to be here. I really appreciate it. Like I said, this is an honor to be able to share a story that it's my own experience, but that can help other people overcome and get out of that darkness that I was once in.
Yeah, there's millions of attempts of suicide every year, and I shared those stats on my last show, so I'm not going to repeat them. So thank you for choosing life, and choosing to share your story. I know that's a very courageous act in and of itself. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. I'm going to be doing another show in about 30 minutes if you want to come back. My beautiful Virgo sister, Shar Butler, is going to be coming in and talking about her journey with suicide and mental health. And we'll talk a little bit about combo frog medicine too. So until next time, everyone, just wishing you the best health, the best wealth, and the best journey within to find your deepest and best wisdom for you. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, download, leave a 5-star rating or review, and also please refer this to a friend you know who may benefit from this inspirational message. We hope to see you again. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel or join my Facebook community. And if you are looking to manifest your best health, your best wealth by trusting your best wisdom within, please go to my website, www.microdosingforhealth.com. Again, www.microdosingforhealth.com. to quiet your mind, get into your heart, heal your body, and manifest your best health and